All right, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. So we're really interested in learning more about what brought you to Rutgers in the first place.
Yes.
And what year was that?
2008. Well, actually, no, 2004. I graduated in 2008. Yes. Yeah, so what brought me to Rutgers in the first place? Well, it's quite a few things. One, I entered Rutgers as a biology major and with in the mindset that I was going to be pre-med. And I actually graduated also with a degree in biology and a minor in psychology. But ultimately, what I was looking for was connection, even close to UMDNJ, because when I was a high school student, I took a lot of different courses that was formerly known as the pre-med, well, they call it mini med school right now. And so I already was developing a connection within the Rutgers, particularly Rutgers North community already. So what brought me to Rutgers was primarily the sciences and also knowing how much of a close-knit community and environment it was. And just having had experience around the area, I just felt like this is a great space for me for that time. Oh, I can't hear you.
That's great. And what were some of the most meaningful experiences that you had as a student?
It's funny because the experiences that I had as a student it's the same type of experiences I have right now as an adult. And so as a student, I was really drawn to a lot of service-based activities. I was a part of NJ PIRG. And with NJ PIRG, I was very much involved with the environment and community service and being able to really connect with like-minded people on campus, trying to make a change, understand what was the conditions of the environment, and also inform people about what was going on. And I was also very much also a part of the Rutgers Red Cross, and I found that was a place that was very much, it was very enjoyable for me to be able to connect more with my peers and also just being involved with a lot of student-based work. One of the most memorable experiences was also during the Hurricane Katrina and just being a part of other communities and trying to raise money during that time. And then ultimately, there was a time that I started to branch out and started doing a lot of other service-based work around certain things that I was most interested in at the time, particularly when I was a sophomore. Being a sophomore at Rutgers University, Newark, I took almost like a detour because it was during that time I found out that my mother was diagnosed for invasive breast cancer. And she's a survivor, but it really hit me because my mom is a single parent and I have two brothers, and one of my brothers is severely autistic. And he doesn't communicate. And so I found out over the phone, because although I lived and grew up in New Jersey in terms of my high school, and I hope I'm not over speaking about different things, but in terms of like high school, my experience, as soon as I transitioned to my college and school, my family decided to relocate and go to Missouri. So I found out over the phone at that time that she was diagnosed with invasive breast cancer. And I wanted to go back, but ultimately I was encouraged to finish through. And then I started to try to figure out ways in which I can address certain issues, because at the time she was very young. And it was really uncommon for our family because we didn't have family history of cancer. And so I started to test certain things out during that time. And mind you, entering Rutgers, I was very shy. So a lot of the things I started to do really pushed me out of my comfort zone. I was the type of person that kind of liked to do work. I worked a lot, but I like to be in the background. And so I started to create a casting call during this time, and a casting call to get other people across the country involved to be a part of what I was going to call like a traveling exhibit where people can be photographed and hold place cards about an issue. And I chose cancer for the obvious reasons for that time, breast cancer. And ultimately, we convened into a studio location. I got people from all over to come together and be photographed, and these images started to take place. So that was like a real pivotal moment for me. But it was one of the most meaningful experiences because I didn't necessarily think, when you take on a big task like that, you don't necessarily think that, sometimes you don't like, oh, I'm going to achieve this because you never tried it before. It's out of curiosity. And when it was actually completed, that project, I never really thought about like, oh, I'm going to make this into a nonprofit. I'm going to do certain things that's going to be about education and getting young people riled out for change. I never really thought about that until I started to listen to what the community was saying based off of the reaction of what we were doing. So that was like a real game-changing experience for me.
You have come through a lot and come through it stronger and such an incredible person. Talk about your current job and what you do with your organization.
Yes, so I still have the GEM project, but what's so great about it is that I now do it like full time. So back then, for a very long time, it was volunteer based. So while I was starting to build up on the nonprofit, it was a nonprofit that was really focused primarily on educating young people, having college students act as activity leaders and carry out these lesson plans. I think my dog is crying. Carry out these lesson plans into the community and execute it. But today it has evolved. It has evolved to really focus on creating a year-long fellowship between high school students and college students. So what that looks like is they work together in like almost like a peer mentoring model, and they go and they identify community-wide issue about certain things that they believe that impact them as well as the people within their communities. And they participate in what is known as like youth organizing. So youth organizing is almost like, can be thought of like almost like a social justice strategy where young people are taking through different processes to identify an issue, participate in community-based research, and then determine the type of direct action that they want to address on that issue. And so right now, I oversee the entire company and organization. We work with several young people all across the city of Newark, as well as outside of Newark now. And they convene and they work on different campaigns.
Amazing stuff for somebody who's so young. You had a little visitor in there. Tell us about
Oh, Pablo?
Yes.
Oh, Pablo, he's a sweet dog. He's almost, he's gonna be 5 in December. And he's like telling me that I should pet him, keep on petting him. He's such a cute dog. He's a Chihuahua and Italian Greyhound.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never heard of that mix before. That's great.
Yeah.
So you graduated how many years ago?
Several years ago. So that I graduated in 2008. So
I was going to say, I think I have a lot more several years ago than you.
Okay. But it's so funny to think about, you know. It's just. And
what got you involved with the alumni programs at Rutgers?
Wow. So it's so funny. When you create a project, right? I created this project while I was in school. And sometimes when people develop things or decide to enter the world of entrepreneurship, they don't do it sometimes with the idea of like they're already like this leader or community person. It kind of either it falls into their lap or it's some other situation impacted their life, and that's why they pursued it. And so when I was graduating Rutgers University, I was exploring different opportunities. I wanted to stay connected to Rutgers because I valued the experience, because I felt like I grew the most at Rutgers because of what I've gone through, and also the people who I was connected by. And so I remember like it was yesterday, just kind of like browsing the website and learning about the Rutgers Alumni, University Alumni Association, and then trying to figure out where I possibly could fit in terms of applying for leadership positions. And I ultimately decided to like, let me just apply for a board position and see what happens. And I guess I was just trying to see what way can I either stay connected to Rutgers and then also try to improve my leadership and learn from other people, and be curious about it. And I remember just being so surprised too when I received, I remember the email I received from Donna, who recently retired, and just realizing like, wow, there might be a chance that I might possibly be able to be a part of this great group of people to represent Rutgers University community on a larger scale. So that was, and that time for me, serving my first 3 years, and also right now as I enter my first year as an officer, has been truly, truly one of the most life-changing experiences in my life, because I grew and I learned so much in regards to leadership and how to be intentional with people and how to like engage different people. And I just felt like it was such a wonderful experience, and it still is.
I agree. Being a volunteer for Rutgers is so many rewards,
Yes.
tangible as well as pride.
Mm-hmm.
What are some lessons that you learned at Rutgers that you use now?
All right. Lessons I learned at Rutgers. And I could think there's so many lessons. There's so many lessons. Don't take things to heart if you're trying to improve as a person. Take feedback and be honest with yourself when you want to have feedback. And I say this because there has been so many moments in my life. When I think of Rutgers, I also think of my experience as I was developing as a person, and also really developing my organization. I spent half my year at Rutgers developing my organization. So I started it when I was a sophomore. And there's so many people, the staff and faculty, who have given me a lot of insight as to who I was and where I was going. And they also gave me some really, really tough conversations and things that I learned. One, be meticulous. Try to be meticulous when it comes to the information that you're bringing out to the public. I remember, and it sounds silly and it seems trivial at the time, but trying to organize an event, and I sent a flyer to a professor, and there was a typo, and I didn't know, and I was like, let me just send it, and I think they're gonna like it. And she's like, first of all, you need to make sure you proofread everything. And so that's when I was like, okay, I have to make sure I check everything. And how that translates now for me, it's important as I'm like reviewing and drafting contracts. I'm always very meticulous and methodical in how I approach things. The other thing was, when I was graduating Rutgers, I met someone named Chas Johnson. He's late Chas Johnson. He used to work in the Dana Cotton Library at Rutgers University. And during that time, I think it was in 2008, I realized I didn't document a lot of my experiences. And I wanted to create a documentary at that time. And I told him my idea. And when you're young, sometimes when you're really young, you're just so excited. You think your idea is the best idea, and you just go in. And And I went in and I was like, I have an idea. And he was like, what is going on, Amanda? What's happening? And I was like, okay, I'm going to sit and I'm going to tell you. I want to see if we can film. I really like the way the certain furniture is in this space. We can use it. And I can also not only talk about the Gem Project story, I can bring other young people in the space who are doing amazing things, and we can just shoot it and it'll be great. And he was like, I'll think about it. And so he said he's going to talk to his supervisor, and he ultimately did it. And I remember him showcasing bloopers to me. And the bloopers, he asked me, what is the mission for the Gem Project? And I gave him this long drawn out statement. I said something about creative imagery, and we educate to captivate. And he was like, do you realize that most people won't understand what you're saying? And I was like, what do you mean? I say it all the time, and everybody's like, yeah. Well, that's because they're lying in your face. They don't want to say it to your face. And so he told me one thing that struck out. He told me then, and it was on a blooper, and it was on those VHS tapes, okay? This is way back, you know? And he said, speak to me like a 2-year-old. That advice blew my mind then, because it was hard for me. Because in my mind, I was thinking everything made sense, but then I realized it made sense to me, not to other people. And so I had to figure out, how can I break my communication down and make it digestible? And so that is something I constantly think about when I'm communicating, whether it's through emails, or if I'm trying to explain an idea or write a proposal for something. I try to be as clear as possible. And I try to remove as much jargon as possible and to make sure that everyone understands, and they don't have to have a certain skill set, or they don't have to have a certain background or context of what I'm trying to say. So that's something that I learned from Chas Johnson.
That's great stuff. Final question. Class of 2020.
Wow.
They're coming into a very challenging world right now.
Yes.
As a recent graduate and as someone who's very successful as a young alumnus, what's your advice to the graduating class of 2020?
My advice would be, I know it's challenging right now, and I think that this is a perfect time to, one, be creative and flexible. And I say that because there's lessons to gain from any position or any opportunity, even in a space where you have to actually hit a pause button. And also lean in, figure out ways where you can lean in with opportunities, whether it's from previous professors, your current students. Use it as an opportunity to start thinking strategically on how do you foster and improve your relationships within these certain subgroups, because you would be surprised how many opportunities can actually come from different people. And I would say try to think more strategically around that. And if you have this goal, this big goal for one day, and it doesn't matter what the goal is, it could be, I don't know, maybe you want to be a director for something, and maybe you got an opportunity that was maybe a paid internship, and you feel as if that's not what you should be doing because of your degree, but because there's certain issues that are happening across the country, and now that things are not as strong in terms of foundation, try to still be your best self and operate within that framework, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter what the job is, everybody has value. And I'll give you an example. When I also graduated at Rutgers, and I was doing the GEM project, and it was very much volunteer based. I went and I started to work. I think I worked part-time at a nonprofit organization and I chose some really part-time role, and it was very basic, very few hours. And I was pretty much on the lower end of the totem pole. But at the same time, when I went in every day for that job, I didn't approach it that way. I figured out what is the lesson that I can learn from this position, and how can I understand everybody's role in every department, and how can I be a resource within that role. So I found myself oftentimes I wasn't given enough work, or didn't have much work to do at all. And sometimes you find yourself in those particular positions, maybe because either people are very busy, or maybe some people may not necessarily know how to manage in terms of multiple priorities. So try to figure out how can you, not only create work for yourself, but figure out how you can really bolster your skills. Right. And I think, and I'll say this, there's ways in which you can get experiences outside of your role. So you can communicate with people in different lateral departments, casually develop relationships, and start to create this persona of yourself of getting the job done and learning. Use it as an opportunity to learn about everything. And start to build your resume around that. And you'll be surprised. There are certain things that I often think when I think about leadership, in terms of like exemplary leadership, I go to that moment. And I think of certain people who I may not have been directly connected with, but those conversations I was observing, and I was learning. Indirectly from them. And I use those moments to bring into my own work. So that's an example. Be flexible and creative.
Amanda, terrific advice. Thank you so much to you, and thank you to Paco.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. He's happy too.
You too. Take care. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marty.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care.